Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to Navigating the Jump, working as a planner one. I know it's afternoon on a Saturday, so I'm glad everyone could come out and attend. We have a really good event lined up with a really good panel and some really good information. We're going to kick it off and get started. Agenda. Talk a little about your moderator, which is me. My name is Cole Malo. I just graduated from FSU and now I work in Tampa for a small company called Renaissance Planning. Joining me with facilitation is Nan Ju. She is a research assistant at Auburn University, working in the planning field. Our online tools will cover in a minute, available from APA, are great resources for finding a job and then working in a professional career capacity and the wide variety of different fields that we have here in planning. We've assembled a lot of really great information and tips from our all-star panel, which I'll summarize briefly in 4 or 5 slides on finding a job, interview, networking, and salary. And then we'll open it up, formally introduce our panel, and then discuss any questions that you may have. So you can ask questions or raise your hand through the Q&A, and then Nan will help facilitate those questions at the end of the formal part of the presentation. So let's get started. The SRC is the host of this event. We are one of the 3 major components of APA. Chapters are sort of geographically distributed throughout APA, like think your state chapter. We have 22 divisions, which span from things like transportation to environment, to other specific planning fields. And then there's the SRC, which represents all students who are planning students and who registered with APA. Students are actually the largest single constituent within APA. So it's really good that we're beginning to work harder and harder to promote student issues at the national level. I represent Region 3, which is sort of Florida from Texas, but we have representatives all over the country and in fact internationally. Check out our website, planning.org/students. Really good information in there that we're going to continue to develop over time. Before we really get started on some of the nitty-gritty, here are the existing resources. This is kind of like the existing conditions section of the report. APA has a really good career services staff that they run the Career Center. They have a bunch of free webinars that are available to members of the planning of APA, things like advancing in different fields like the federal division or in transportation, then specific things for developing your skill set, like professional development wise. APA divisions, again, those 22 planning specific areas, typically work to advance more niche issues. Take, for instance, the LGBTQ division, which works to promote equality in planning. Job boards, APA has a national job board, and then most APA chapters have state-level job boards. Typically, those are advertising-based. So those are companies and departments and firms that post jobs that they really want filled. So make sure you check those out. PlanNetizen also has a job board. Most APA chapters have a mentorship program that are run in conjunction with local colleges and universities. I myself went through one such mentorship program. If you feel like you're a little old to join the mentorship program, consider actually signing up to be a mentor itself. This is really good to integrate new planners into the field as soon as possible and sort of show them the ins and outs. APA publishes a really awesome salary calculator. I'll talk about that in a minute, but we have it linked on this page. And last year, the SRC published, we held a really good online event about this time called How to Get a Job, How to Get a Planning Job with No Planning Experience. It was really focused at people who are fresh in the planning field. How do you exactly develop planning experience when you are brand new? And all the jobs for which you're applying require 2 years of planning experience. It's kind of a catch-22. So this development, this exercise spoke to some of those issues. And again, we have it linked. Other resources and items to consider are your alumni network and local career centers, both sort of at your university or college, or also like locally run by your state or your county. Certifications you can consider include AICP, which is me. The Leadership in Environmental Design has a bunch of certifications, including the Lead Green Associate, which is kind of the entry-level certification, and Transportation Demand Management Certified Professional is also a really good program for just getting started and showing that you know what you're talking about. Also consider your future graduate school goals. This event will be focused on professional development, including working in government and the private sector, but working in academia is sort of a whole nother animal. It's really cool, really important. We won't directly speak to that too much, but it's a really important thing to consider for your own future. So I think we jumped the slide. The next couple of slides will be summarizing tips from our panel, starting with networking, like finding your position. And all of our panels really emphasize how you network is really your professional lifeline. You want to leverage your existing network as much as possible. So think your professors, your friends, people that you met at conferences, let them know that you're interested in finding a job or switching jobs, and use them to build out a larger network, either asking for introduction with someone who you think could maybe get you hired. Make sure you always come prepared with interesting questions and interesting information about yourself. Second thing is cold calling and cold emailing. It's really scary. I know for a fact how scary it is, but it turns out that it can also be really effective. Oftentimes organizations and departments and firms may be thinking sort of in co-ed fashion that they might need a job or might need someone to fill a role, but they don't quite know what it is yet. And it just takes someone really enthusiastic to reach out and show how they could fill a potential future need to satisfy that. Finally, leave a mark. I don't often think about this, but make sure you bring a business card for folks you meet. And I know this is like virtual with a pandemic, so consider a virtual business card. And also consider developing like a website, or if you don't want to, your LinkedIn profile can host a lot of your best work. You want to make sure that you're memorable and that folks can find you online or over email and find your best work in an easy way. This is a funny meme I think a lot of us have seen. We're applying for a job in the pandemic. It's like the dog on the whole world is collapsing, and here we are applying for jobs. But anyway, sorry, my Zoom is, there we go. Crafting your application. So think about your resume. Your application should show how you fill current and future needs for the position that you're applying for. All of our panelists emphasize that your cover letter needs to be tailored for the job for which you're applying. I know how frustrating this can be. It feels like you're applying for a bunch of jobs, but the cover letter really needs to speak to why you're a good fit for the company and why you fill those roles. Your resume can be more flexible. You can have someone refer to it as a skeleton resume, where you sort of mix and match different things to make sure that the skills match the job for which you're applying. Make sure that you have your resume and your cover letter reviewed by a friend of yours, maybe a couple of friends, and then also your local career center. Things like typos or things that just don't read right, those are important to catch. Highlight your best work when possible in your resume. And again, make it accessible online. Think through your LinkedIn portfolio or through a website that you might have. That's a really good way to actually put up, show your work that you speak highly of in your resume. When you consider design and formatting, I know everyone loves dark mode. I love dark mode, but your resume is not the time to have a dark mode. Less is more. Consider leveraging some of your more graphically inclined friends to help you make some strategic decisions about the design of your resume. And be careful with objective statements that might end up pigeonholing you. So think, oh, well, I only want to build multimodal trails. Well, that's really great, but be careful using language that's strong when you're applying for a job that might be a little more general than that. Finally, again, keep a smart digital presence. So again, a digital portfolio. You can also consider using Google Drive to host your files without them necessarily being visible to everybody all the time. And this one speaks directly to me. If anyone has applied to a bunch of jobs, they know that sometimes websites offer you to just upload your resume, which is great, and then a moment later ask you to enter in all of your information again, which is like one of the most frustrating things possible. So it's sort of funny. Sorry, here we go. Navigating your interview. Interviews are two-sided. Make sure that you are meeting the company's needs and make sure that the company or firm meets your needs. Understand where you're applying, do some research, Google News, company marketing pages. Those provide really good general information about the firm. And you can highlight things that excite you and things that give you pause. Those are the items that you could actually bring up in the question phase of an interview. Make sure when you prepare for your interview that you have some of those questions in your pocket that you can always pose to your panel. Take advantage of mock interviews and practice it with your friends and probably the mirror and make sure you ask about the organization's future goals. And then say thanks. Consider drafting a series of thank you emails to your interview panel, and send those within 24 hours. But like, don't push it. You don't want to be too annoying or seem like you're doing the most. Like, just send a nice thank you email and follow up in a week. And finally, this is my last sort of potential slide on in the toolkit, your salary. Know your worth and know your options. APA publishes a really good salary calculator that was developed by a series of statisticians based on survey data from planners across the country. You can log into this. You can log into this platform if you have an APA membership and calculate your expected salary based on your years of experience, the type of firm that you're working in, and whether you're AICP certified. However, you need to adjust for inflation because this isn't done every year. I think the last one is in 2017. So make sure that you add on for inflation, especially now that we have inflation as a growing concern nationwide. Another way to know your worth is to ask your friends. I know it's an uncomfortable subject, but make sure that you put together an ideal package for you based on what you feel like folks that are around your experience level and ability sort of make, and that really meets your needs. Keep in mind that a lot of government positions, particularly at the federal level, use like a pay band system. There's not too much advice that we can give here in terms of negotiation, but you just want to be familiar with how those pay bands work based on experience. In other words, you may be negotiating how much experience you have rather than simply your dollar value. And consider your full package. Healthcare, PTO, stock options, holidays, raises, automatic raises, bonuses, and professional reimbursement policies actually all factor into a job offer. It's not just your salary. And finally, keep in mind, our hourly expectations really do range widely. It could be that you're working 40 hours a week or you're working 60. That is an important discussion point for interviews. Some people love working a bunch, 60 hours a week, and some people are going to have a big issue with that. And you want to make those expectations clear through your interview and also through your salary negotiation phase, which I know for a lot of folks seems like a really distant concern, but trust me, it's worth keeping in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our all-star panelists. I'll start with Hannah Reynolds. She just graduated from FSU with her master's in planning. She right now works as a multimodal planner with CDM Smith. Hannah, do you want to unmute and say hi?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this conversation. So as he said, I am a multimodal planner with CDM Smith, primarily focusing on trails throughout Florida. Before this position, I worked at Florida State University in the transportation department with transportation demand management as my role. And him and I both graduated at the best time possible, peak COVID 2020 in May. So I thankfully started planning to try to get a job way in advance. And that was really great because I had secured one before graduation. But last November, I passed the AICP exam. And in July, I will be fully certified once I complete the essays. And lastly, since transportation and bike and pedestrian planning is really my passion and why I went into this field, in my spare time, I volunteer with a local nonprofit, Bicycle House of Tallahassee. So stay pretty busy in this field, but absolutely love it. And I'm glad I'm a part of this because it's really important to be prepared when you are going into the field.
Awesome. Thanks, Hannah. Hannah's a good friend of mine.
Yes.
Also, next introduction, Julian Griffey received his master's in science and planning from the University of Arizona, currently works as a town planner and floodplain administrator with certified zoning official distinction with the town of Atlantic Beach, North Carolina. Hey, Julian, do you want to say hello?
Hey, how's it going? Yeah, so as Cole had mentioned, so I'm Julian. As he has stated, I'm currently a town planner for the city of Atlantic Beach in North Carolina. And so as that role, I navigate through FEMA regulations, through state regulations. North Carolina has this kind of overlay for 20 counties on the coast. So I have to navigate those policies as well as our local ordinances. My background is I went to UNC Charlotte. I got a degree in geography, concentration in land use planning, and I've been in different sections of planning. So I've been an administrator for an MPO. For a little bit, I did a Peace Corps service as an urban and regional planning volunteer in Albania. For 2.5 years, I've been a planner one for another municipality, and I also do research for the city of Tucson in the Bike and Ped program, as well as the Planning and Development Services Department, doing climate action planning and then research in micromobility.
Awesome, man, you had that down. Wonderful. Next up, Christina Hooker is a talent acquisition specialist, aka she's a recruiter with WGI. She works nationwide, but is stationed out of West Palm Beach. Hey, Christina, do you want to say hello?
Hi, so glad I could join everybody today. Thank you for including me. So I work for WGI and Human Resources as a recruiter. It's a less fancy way of saying it. And my specialty is transportation positions. We're a professional design services firm, with offices throughout the country. And I specialize in transportation positions, planning, landscape architecture, civil engineering, so land development, environmental, and then all our corporate positions. So
thank you. We're so glad to have your perspective here on the panel.
Yeah, of course.
Finally, Joey Pavlik is an active transportation planner with the Alamo Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. He's getting his MS in planning at UT San Antonio. Hey, Joey, do you want to say hello?
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here this morning, this afternoon. So at the Alamo Area PO, I'm the active transportation planner. And so it's essentially all things bike pedestrian planning in our study area. So all of the APOs, we include a few counties and quite a few cities in our region. So it includes, all things bike pedestrian planning, staffing our bike ped committee meetings and all that involves with that. Doing walkable and bikeable workshops and reporting on that. Bike safety classes, I just taught one this morning about how to get safer on a bike, and doing education at local schools, working with a lot of our local nonprofits, and some of which, working with that same aspect of working with nonprofits, serving on some of those, such as like Activate SA, one new one in San Antonio, focusing on increasing the number of trails and opportunities for cyclists and active transportation users in our region. And so prior to this role, I had an unorthodox, path to planning. I received a bachelor's in sociology, minor in urban planning. In college, I worked at the San Antonio Museum of Art as a membership manager right out of college. And then following that, I worked for a local state representative as a constituent services and constituent services and community outreach manager for the state representative. And so I think it's an interesting outlook and just getting involved civically and working, being a public servant. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Right. Well, we're glad to have that more broad public service, political community perspective as well. So welcome to the panel. We're going to open up to Q&A in just a minute. You can either raise your hand and Nam will call on you, or you can just simply type in your question in the question and answer box. I should have mentioned earlier that all of the materials in these slides will be uploaded to the planning.org website. So the slideshow has links to all the great resources that I mentioned, and you'll be able to log on and access those. I'm going to kick it off with just a general question for the panel, which is about getting discouraged in a job search. So a lot of folks get discouraged in the job search, especially early on, even after they've had an interview and they really never hear back, or they don't even really get that far. What would you say to them? Have you been in that position, and what did you do? I'm just going to make it general, and then the panel can speak up as they may.
I'll jump in real quick. I guess going off my random experience, I really don't want to be a planner out of college. I had some difficulties in school, ended up with a degree wasn't focused on urban planning. And so I worked in different entities and found my way into planning later on through largely, a lot of networking and like really pushing that payment. A lot of things I've covered, cold calling, just, using my network and different aspects like that, doing internships and having a robust background resume and to help me out in the future, be holistic background to help me out in my current role.
From the kind of the recruiter side, quite often when we interview someone, even though you might be a really strong fit for the position and we are actively interviewing, sometimes there's just things in the process that slow you down. So the hiring manager, especially in a company, that's 300 plus employees, they're doing their everyday work in addition to searching for someone for a position. So they're hiring as well as working. So often it's not a personal thing. It's not that they're not interested in you. It's just that they have so much on their plate. They're just literally not having the time to sit down and think about like, okay, these are the people that are applying. These are the resumes I need to review, and kind of delegating what the next step is. So please, by all means, from my end, I love it when people follow up because it keeps your resume and your information in front of the hiring manager. And it shows a level of enthusiasm from your side. It really helps you kind of stand out. So don't be afraid to follow up. It's not annoying or a nuisance, and it's not that they're not interested. It's literally that sometimes they just have too much on their plate, especially if someone has left the position and they're having to, keep up with that work in addition to their regular work. So follow up is good.
Okay, so it looks like we have 4 different questions. The first one would be someone asks that what kind of work do you recommend highlighting in a portfolio? Any of our panelists wants to answer that?
So I would say if you're starting out, definitely if you have a thesis or any type of research that you've done, any type of really large projects, definitely put those in there. If you have some GIS maps that you're proud of, put those in there. A lot of employers now in the planning field love that. And pretty much anything you've done that is nice, put it in there and somewhat planning related. My thesis was not at all related to what all of the jobs I've been going into and trying to get a job with, but it showed that I knew how to actually write an really nice paper. And yeah, so definitely put everything kind of in there and then you can tweak it a bit.
If you don't mind, I'm going to jump in and I'll just piggyback off that. So at the University of Arizona, we were pretty heavy in design skills. So I got pretty familiar with Photoshop and those kind of InDesign programs. I would put something in a portfolio that I would be really curtailed to what they're doing. I would research the entity and see what kind of projects they're doing. So for example, when I was applying to a position that eventually got kind of stalled because of COVID was with the city of Charlotte and their bike and ped program. And so I knew that I had done some transportation related things or TOD development related projects. And I immediately, of course, put those towards the top of my portfolio.
Okay, thank you. And then the other questions were, what can anyone recommend for moving cities and getting a planner job? Someone right now is studying in LA, but planning to go to Oregon to work as a planner.
So I'm just gonna pipe in here. My biggest thing is LinkedIn. I think that's the way to really get your network growing in whatever place you want to relocate. Do some research, figure out if you're wanting to work in the private sector in that area, add them on LinkedIn. If you want to work in the public, add them on LinkedIn, or figure out who that hiring manager would be. Like, that's what I've always done. If I'm applying places, I add all the people that I think would want to know more about me. And that's just another way that they know that you're doing more research, and then they can look at your profile again.
Okay, thank you.
Before we go, I think this is an important question for students just graduating. It's a question that I had when I was immediately graduating from planning school. I would like to hear more from the panel on geographical relocation, and maybe particularly from Christina. What are the concerns or hesitations that you have hiring someone who would need to move to fill a role? And has COVID and working remotely sort of softened any of that concern?
I think the number one concern, at least from our end, is that we spend time interviewing someone and then they're actually not able to make the move for one reason or another. So if you're able to provide some sort of a timeline, some kind of level of commitment that, like, yes, you are moving, you're planning on moving October 1st, And giving a deadline, people are really receptive to that, and it eliminates a lot of the fear. And from there, things tend to go a lot more smoothly. You know, for entry-level positions, it is hard to ask for a relocation kind of, you know, assistance, but it's worth mentioning. If you do need that assistance, it might not be a lot. The market is tight though. So, you know, it is very tight. So now, if any was the time, is the time to ask for relocation assistance. People are willing to do that. Probably 2 years ago, not so much, but right now, you know, people are really, it's hard to find, you know, qualified candidates for positions. So if you're looking to relocate, now would be the time to just try to put a deadline or a timeline on when that move would be.
Okay, thank you.
Joey, did you have a thought? Looked
Yeah,
like
I
you-
guess definitely on that, because back when I was in school, I was in the urban planning program at Texas A&M when I went to school there, and so one of the things we're focusing like on our student organization, it was focusing on taking field trips and going to different cities, especially larger cities in Texas, where there would be probably planning programs or other organizations, similar organizations, and so in that case, and especially I think that question about moving is has different parts of that. So is it a city, like, is it your home city, or is it a city like your target city you want to go to? Or like in other cases, like you applied to a job and you go to that city because you got that job. So especially in my case, I wanted to move back to San Antonio. So that was my target city. So I made those connections. Like we took a field trip and we met some folks in different City of San Antonio offices. And we met some people that they're still my colleagues today. I keep in touch with. They're some of my mentors. And one of my friends, Patrick, that helped me, get on this call today. We both keep in touch with a lot of those planners and different professionals that we met during those professional tours. And so definitely, if that's the one city is your targeted city, definitely work on that network far in advance so they can give you, hey, heads up, there's this job opening, there's this planner position opening in a month or so, because many of them may know somebody who left or something, so you can apply to that job in advance. So if you have a city, like a target city in advance, definitely try to start working on that. You're going to graduate in a year, try to start working on that, your network. If you're not going on a field trip there or something, like y'all said, cold calling, cold emailing, getting in touch with that particular city department or governmental department or firm and making those connections early on.
Thank you. So the next two questions are related to AICP certification. So someone asks that, what do you need to get AICP certification or other certification? Is it open to recent grads? And then another is for all the panelists, is that any tips to stay up to date on planning initiatives on generating information about that part? I guess Hannah or Cole, you wanted to answer this because you are just certified.
Yeah, sure. I can speak quickly to the AICP part of things. AICP is a wonderful certification to have, and if you are currently in planning school, you can enroll as a candidate for AICP. The requirements for actually testing and getting your full certification change, and they vary, but that information is really easy, is made really accessible on the AICP website, which you can probably just Google, but we have it linked here in this presentation. And APA and AICP staff are really attentive to figuring out particular circumstances or issues. So yes, AICP, if you are currently in an accredited planning program and you graduate with a graduate degree in planning, you can sit for your exam very quickly. In terms of the second question, I wasn't, Nan, can you maybe rephrase that? I didn't quite understand what
I think
was
someone is asks what can you do to stay up to date about some of the strategies or generate information about planning?
If that's more of a question about what resources APA has, I'll speak to that as the APA representative. APA is really good about keeping in touch. In fact, sometimes too much. APA has the PAS Planning Advisory Service, and that is a free resource for members on a variety of issues that they keep up to date, and they query planners on like what's new in planning and how should I apply it in my private practice. So PAS reports, that's where I would point you. Does the panel have any thoughts about how to keep up to date with the planning field?
So at least here locally in North Carolina, there is it's through Chapel Hill, but it's a listserv. And so the listserv serves as an email sign up for professional planners, also, I guess, anyone that's interested. And so we use that email listserv to, one, find job opportunities, but two, to ask each other questions. And there's this one guy, Harrison Smith, he likes to just pump out articles pretty consistently, 2 or 3 times literally every day, on things going around the country. So I don't know if other states happen to have that, or if you wanted to sign up through the North Carolina listserv, you're more than welcome to do so. But it's a tool to find job opportunities, but also ask other planners questions. How is your UDO operating this or navigating this? We're looking at adopting this kind of plan, asking expertise and advice from other communities.
They have a listserv also through the University of South Florida. It's the Center of Urban Transportation Research, and it's a TDM, which is Transportation Demand Management specific listserv. And they kind of do the exact same thing. There's a lot of conversations back and forth between like planning policies and then also job announcements. So there's a lot of listservs out there. You just kind of need to do a little bit of digging.
And really quickly, aside from AICP, so I don't have my AICP certification, not yet at least, but I do have CZO. So CZO is a certified zoning official in the state of North Carolina, and I believe they also have them in Pennsylvania and perhaps Texas. It's a state designed or designated certification. So I would advise to check if what states have certain certifications. So my job put me through the school government at Chapel Hill to take this course, and they paid for the course and the travel and logistics, and then I got a raise after I got that certification. So it's kind of twofold. It's one, check what certifications and opportunities that your job will provide to you. There's also in the state of North Carolina, I think Oregon and Texas and a couple around the country that has CFM, Certified Floodplain Manager. So that's another certification that you can get that's not per se nationally, but it is in different states, and that is a certification that you can get.
Okay, thank you. So our next question is, do you have any tips or resources for interview related to planning? Who would like to answer that?
I'm gonna do this really quickly. Sorry. So I got a question from Jennifer, who happened to ask if I had hazard experience before I got my planning position, because I do FEMA and state regulations in the coastal floodplain. One tip that I had is, she had asked, did I have experience beforehand? I didn't. But I made that well known in the interview that while I don't have this experience, I'm very excited and interested in this position because I don't have that experience and I want to get it. And I need to obviously start somewhere, but I do have skills that can translate into whatever floodplain regulations that I'm eager to learn. So don't be, I guess, completely opposed to stating no, I don't, but then twist in a way that you want it for a specific reason and you're interested in, that's your driving kind of factor.
I'll add something for that too, especially before I got this job, I didn't have any official planning experience, but I really tied into my passions, which was cycling, and especially cycling, but also walking safety in my experience in college, and just like hammering that, and also my previous experience working for a public official, and just really hammering on your passions too, because I feel like, especially in planning, a lot of us are really, really passionate about this. And when you see that connection, it's like, yes, like we're so excited that somebody else is really passionate about this stuff. And so I think like really making that personal, like that's what I did my cover letter. Like this is my job right now. I applied this job right out of college, and I didn't get it, so I applied it again later on, and I got it. But my cover letter was like one of my most unique cover letters. And I really made it more personal. And same with my interview too. Just made sure like really tie like my passions, I am so passionate about this job, why I want to get this job. So don't be afraid to do that too in some cases.
Okay. Thank you, Joey. So, but I wanted to ask that, how do you tailor your answer for what if your potential employer asks you, because you don't have a real planning working experience, how would you tailor your projects or studies that you have done to make sure that you can do the job that we offer you? How can someone tailor the answer like that?
I think just being really articulate about your communication skills, because that's a lot of the job. So your ability to write, your writing ability, showing samples of your work, you know, that you're comfortable working in a team, working with others, you know, communicating in front of groups of people, as well as, you know, showing some of your technical skills. You know, you might not have the professional experience working in you know, a professional environment, but if you have the communication skills and the technical skills, you know, in design, AutoCAD, SketchUp, you know, those can all be pulled together and you know, teach you from there. So really just making sure that you're conveying that you do have that knowledge and are able and willing to learn.
And I would touch on that too. Being a young professional, sometimes you don't always have access to some of those, you know, AutoCAD or SketchUp or Adobe Creative Cloud because they're really expensive. But there are resources out there to learn it. And even during the interview, you can highlight that you really care about learning and expanding your knowledge. And you can say, you know, how you're trying to learn these outside on your own as well with YouTube or LinkedIn Learn or some of the other resources that a lot of times even universities have and people don't tap into. So, you know, people like to see that passion. They like to see the enthusiasm. They like to know that you can talk with people because planning is not only the back end, like Christina was saying. And, you know, having that personality really helps. So there's a lot you can do.
And
Thank you, Hannah.
and I can encourage everyone to continue posing questions, but I have one pre-drafted question that I would like to pose to the panel. It relates to the name of the event, which is Navigating the Jump. And so often when I was in planning school, I heard, well, you know, the real world isn't like this class, like that's not how the real world works. It's made me think sometimes, oh, like, am I in a virtual space here in planning school? Like, what exactly can you provide me more substance as to what the real world is like if, you know, you're such an expert? And then, you never really hear that. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to ask the panel, what do you feel is the biggest change or most substantive, non-obvious difference between being in school, in planning school and working as maybe an intern or a lower level planner and actually starting your full-time career professional job? What is there a big highlight, a notable thing that you'd want to share or tell yourself about? Well, here's what I didn't realize while I was in planning school about working in the planning field full-time.
Okay, thank you, Ko. So
Does
here,
anyone have any thoughts? Maybe not.
I do. One thing that was kind of a challenge for me right after grad school is I was used to just being in that go, 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 constantly working, constantly, you know, working these crazy hours until midnight, 1 a.m. And so it was an adjustment. While I work quite a bit now still, I had to really pull back and remember only work the 40 hours unless you're getting paid to work more because your time is truly valuable now and you should not be working for free. So that was something that I really had to realize coming into the real world and do things outside that maybe you like, such as the volunteering, which helps also your resume and bring in skills that maybe you're not able to do on the job, but would look good for a future job.
Just add to that too. I think like definitely use your skill sets, what you learn in school, like all the different, you know, GIS, whatever, like, you know, just basic things, working Excel sheets, like some of the most basic functions. But also it's just like a lot of interpersonal relationships. So like especially in my role, I deal with a lot of like our bike head committees, our board, different things. People, my last job I was working with constituents, calling about different issues for elected official. This for a lot of people still calling me about bike pedestrian issues in our area. So it's just like a little more like, I mean, you just never know what to expect in some ways, like at least depending on the role you're working in, whether you're working for a government or a private entity, like especially you're working public side, that can be different every day. And, you know, it's like, hey, we have this media project somebody wants us to work on, and definitely just being versatile. And I have to say too, like Hannah was saying, like our organization, we have comp time. So if you're working in events or you have a project you need to work more on, you're tracking that time. And so you can use that free time basically as, you know, additional PTO. So it varies by organization, but there's that, but just be prepared for anything sometimes too.
Thank you, Joey. So next question, I think it's specifically for Christina. So someone asks that, can you please share some of the tips on how to tackle job search for international students in the US, and what firms look for in those applicants who don't have direct planning experience in the country? And on top of that, I would like to ask you, so typically for international students, if we wanted to stay longer in this country, we need someone who can sponsor the working visa. Does ask for sponsoring a working visa would scare the future employer off? I mean, is that appropriate for us to ask the possibility of asking for like a working visa?
I think being forthcoming about it right away is really helpful, because a lot of companies are just not able to. It's very costly actually to do all the paperwork and the legal fees. And so there's this whole back end side that's financially like a really big commitment. And some companies are absolutely able to do it and they're willing to. And other companies, it's just not right for them at that time. And there's really no, I would say, specific, like one size fits all. It's not all big companies can financially afford it. Sometimes they just have a policy that's just not something they do. And sometimes it's the smaller firms that are like, you know what, this is a top talent person. We want them. We think they fit into our culture really well. We're happy to. So I think just, across the board, whether it's a large company or a smaller one, just letting them know, that you are on a student visa or whatever the case may be. The more information that you have, the better. So if you have 2 years left, 1 year left, and just sharing all that information up front, because that way they can decide. They usually have an idea in their head. And yeah, so it's kind of like a tricky thing to navigate, because everybody wants to be, inclusive of everybody and wants to hire the right person, but sometimes it's just the legal fees and the processes and the paperwork. Because also once someone does have their visa, they can actually take the visa and go to another firm with that. So you've invested and paid all that money for them to get the H-1B visa, and then they just left. And there's nothing you can do. So that is the concern a little bit.
Yeah, I get that. Thank you. And then what are some of the firms for international students to look for in those who don't have direct planning experience in the country? Do you have some recommendation or?
I would say probably the larger firms might be a good place to start, just because they have a diversity of background. They might have, they have a lot more offices in different locations. And they've done the process a lot more. So I would say starting with some of the bigger firms might be a good place to start. And, even in the process, it's never a bad thing to ask if someone says, I'm sorry, we're not be able to do that. It's always okay to say, do you know, in the spirit of networking, do you know of anyone that might be? No one's ever offended by the networking thing. Like, we've all been there. So to say, in the spirit of networking, do you happen to know of anyone that might be hiring? People are happy to share information.
Okay, thank you, Christina.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next question would be, what skill sets could give me an edge to help stand out from other planners? Also, the person wants to know, how influential is GIS expertise as a helpful skill set in planning?
I think that just from working with the planners, one thing that we look at mostly is CAD skills, AutoCAD skills. It's one of the top priorities, AutoCAD skills, and InDesign. Those are the two primary computer software programs. GIS certainly for us is a plus, but those I would say would be the top two in priority.
I think it really depends on the job, honestly. So my job, I don't really use ARC that often. I use the county's GIS website, and it's pretty basic for the general purposes for my town. And then looking at the floodplain and whatnot. One thing that I've kind of put a little bit forward is more so because we're about to do a small area plan and I wanted to, design some things. I kind of press and push forward towards my InDesign skills and my designing, because that, like with planners, you have your general kind of skills and your general programs that you use, but the University of Arizona kind of pushed us more so in the design and that kind of element. So that was kind of, I think, a diversified skill set that you don't, I guess, find as common amongst planners.
I would agree to that. I'm someone who's really interested in design, and luckily I've been able to work on those skills quite a bit. And so having the Adobe Creative Cloud, InDesign, Illustrator, Photoshop skills really stands out. But once again, those are expensive programs. So really trying to use those, if your university has them, do them now and get some under your belt with a little bit of portfolio, even if that means you're having to spend extra hours in a lab outside of work. So, and also GIS for my position, particularly, like I don't use it all the time. I know a base knowledge of it, but they had as a requirement that I needed to know GIS. So don't discount yourself if there are requirements for some of these harder skill sets. As long as you have a base knowledge, you can learn those. So don't say like, I can't apply for this, because you truly can learn a lot if you're working on it every day.
And really quickly, speaking to that point in GIS in general, I think it's very important to know like how to find data and where to find data. So for our projects at UA, we would be given an assignment, but we'd have to go and search. So I'm going through a bunch of different databases, whether it's at the state or or federal or whatever level, sifting through the community surveys and finding all these data and then importing it into GIS and then manipulating the data to present what I had to do. I think it's important to have those GIS skills, but also finding data, bringing it in, extracting it, and then refining it to kind of go through that point.
Adding on to a couple of those too, I guess working for a public agency, you never know what you might be doing, especially like a smaller entity like an NPO, like we're a staff of like 18, 19. And so like I have basic expertise and like, or basic knowledge in like ArcGIS, which helps in like working. We have a GIS team at our organization, luckily, but it definitely helps to have that working knowledge and like y'all said, interpreting data, knowing where to find it, knowing what that looks like. But also in terms of like working for a smaller public agency, we use tools like I'm familiar with Photoshop, InDesign, some of those, not expert, but we use something called Canva. Some of y'all may use Canva for some of your marketing. We use Canva just to like for some of our public events, our flyers, different things like that. And just using basic tools like that, just you never know what you're gonna have in your toolbox. I'm doing bike month stuff right now, and I use Google My Maps to put together a simple map of where bike to work day locations are gonna be. So don't be afraid to just use basic tools too. So know how to use tools like ArcGIS, InDesign, different, the whole Adobe suite sometimes, but also don't be afraid to go simple sometimes too. Canva, Google My Maps, anything else.
I think that's a really good point. And from my own experience, GIS is a platform. ArcGIS Map is one piece of software by Esri. ArcPro is another. And these programs have many facets. Just like Photoshop, you can specialize in one particular aspect of using that program. You can specialize in doing the layout, designing the network, adding data and making sure it's cartographically accurate. You don't have to know everything, but it would be good if you're interested in GIS to at least specialize in one thing. And particularly in right now with COVID and online engagement, knowing how to use ArcGIS online tools, which I believe are actually free, would be really, really good to have on your skill set, because those tools are pretty accessible to a more broad audience. They can log in from their computer and check it online and check and add little points and stuff, and then you can bring it back to your team. Not a lot of folks know how to implement ArcGIS online tools. And that's one future looking skill set I would advise for everyone to become familiar with. It's a more simple tool than the desktop versions of Esri's ArcMap and ArcPro. But again, it seems like it's going to be really valuable moving forward.
Thank you, Cole. Thank you, everyone. So our next question is it necessary to get a master's degree in planning, or do some people have success with only a bachelor's degree? Someone heard that people in senior positions all have master's degree.
Really quickly, some of my friends who graduated with me in 2014, they got a job with just a bachelor's, as did I, and then I kind of did my own thing and went through my positions and went abroad and got a master's later. I would say ranking now, though, he is at a much higher level position than I am currently, based on the path and the track that he did. I mean, it kind of depends. I think that when you're given an opportunity, he just happened to be in the right spot at the right time where he was able to navigate up the totem really quickly. At the root of this, no, you don't have to per se have a master's. He's a perfect example of having his bachelor's and just happened to navigate through and is now senior or principal planner or something along those lines.
From a consulting side, I will say, I think the public sector is a bit easier to move your way up because people are able to jump around and really know people. So they can elevate their careers a bit easier with just a bachelor's. But from the consulting side, you can only get to a certain level. If you don't have that master's, you're capped out. You will not get any further. And the same with certifications. Sometimes you will hit that roadblock and they'll pay for the certifications, but until you get those, you will not go further up. So I would suggest really trying to get that master's, or if you get onto a company who will pay for the master's, that's a really good idea too. Because then you'll be even more competitive once you finish both of those.
I would say for the entry-level positions, we're looking at kind of, it's not weighing like this person has a master's, this person doesn't have a master's. It's we tend to weigh more what is their internship experience. And so looking really heavily at that if you're just graduating and you're deciding whether, do I do an internship or apply to a grad school program? We just tend to look at, the internship experience a lot more. Yeah.
I can add on that too. So I was hired obviously with a bachelor's degree and varied experience in, related to planning. But right now, I'm in grad school right now. And so say you have a bachelor's in urban planning, maybe you can get a master's in public administration, especially if that's something you want to do and going into public service, working in city government or other entities. Maybe you can mix it up that way, just really help your skill set run that toolbox. But that's like just one recommendation, especially if you have a bachelor's and you're concerned about that. A lot of organizations like my organization, they do tuition reimbursement. So I was like, I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity, go back to school and get my master's to hopefully secure my future and help me move up later on.
Also, sorry, going back to the certifications, those are also really great. That is something I definitely look for on resumes. And a lot of companies will actually help financially assist you with those certifications. So that's something to also ask when interviewing, if they provide assistance with additional education in terms of certifications, continuing education, that sort of thing.
Thank you, Christina. Okay, so let's move on to the next one is, do you have any recommendations for how to decline a job gracefully and respectively after accepting it?
Well, first up, don't ghost them. That is not good. It's kind of a small industry. Like, I know it sounds weird, but it is. So make sure that you respond, just don't disappear. That just doesn't go well and it could come back to haunt you. So make sure that you say something, and it happens. It happens actually more than you think. So just be forthcoming, be honest. And if you know that you are not going to accept, let them know right away. It's best not to wait until like the day before or the day you're supposed to be there and just not say anything. Also, if you're hesitant and you're weighing two options, let's say, like it can never hurt to bring those up to the, the recruiter, the HR, the manager, because if they think it's a really good fit and it's over like $2,000 or an extra day off or a cell phone, they'll most likely make an adjustment. So if it's not just about culture, it's about just, something, bring it up. It couldn't hurt.
Thank you, Christina. Okay, so let's move on to the next. If you're offered a job that doesn't have the title of a planner, but it's adjacent, is it helpful or harmful for moving into a planning role in the future? Example, operations in a transit agency.
I would say from my experience, it's not going to be harmful. A lot of times role titles are very different among a lot of different organizations. So some person might not even have planner in their title, but their day-to-day job duties are planning. So don't let that necessarily deter you from taking the job, because a lot of times also you can really adjust the job a bit to be more of how you want it to be. At least that's from my experience. Like every position I've seen where my friends, they might be like, oh, I'm a planner 3, but then other people might not even have planning at all in their job title, but they still are.
Even with we have offices in Florida and offices in Texas. And because it was an acquisition, what we call one position in Texas is different than Florida. So I don't think and it's the same exact position. It's just the difference in title. So I don't think it hurts. What to do though is if you are looking for a new job, so you have this title that isn't, planner, but you are looking for a new job, just make sure that somehow you put it in your resume, whether it's in brackets. So let's say you have some unique title, it's okay to put in brackets like planner or something along those lines, or in the first bullet point. So when someone is searching your resume or that skill set, it will pull up. They won't know. So you type in, when we're searching for resumes, we type in the title box, planner. Well, if you don't have that as listed as one of your titles, it won't pull up in a resume search on the recruiter end. So try to put that in a bracket or something in your title and it will pull up in a resume search.
Thank you, Christina.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's move on to next one. Do you recommend doing several internships to get experience? For example, if a job asks for 1 year of experience.
So I'll step into this really fast. As I stated before, I have had a bunch of different kind of opportunities presented to me. So like urban planning abroad, also like MPO, bike and ped program, climate action stuff, whatever. All of those instances, granted, Peace Corps was an anomaly at that point. But I recommend to people to do internships or multiple ones in different positions to kind of figure out what you want to do. So I found out when I did my Metropolitan Planning Organization administrator internship thing over the summer a year ago, I found out that I didn't want to work that high up. I don't, that's just not what I wanted to do. But I'm glad I did it, because then I found out that I don't want to do it. So I would recommend, diversifying your internships and getting a couple different ones to try and figure out, what are you really into and what you find out what you don't want to do.
I guess adding on to that too.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, definitely agree with those comments as well. And just, I actually had a job, my first interview or that first internship was in real estate. And so that's also one of my interests. And it definitely I'm doing a lot of work with our Urban Land Institute chapter here right now, just because obviously transportation and real estate has a very close relationship, as is everything in the planning field. It's all very interconnected. And so, and also going off the point too far, forget, it's actually my first internship talking about networking and stuff. Don't forget about things like Twitter, because the planning Twitter world is crazy. There's lots of interesting information, opportunities for networking there too. my first internship, I made a connection through Twitter and received my internship offer through there. So you never know.
That's that kind of touching on the networking. Internships is a great opportunity for you to find out what you like. If you like working for a big firm, small firm, in public sector, private sector. If you don't like the field at all, like you might finish and be like, you know what, I don't really like this. So it's a good way to test it all out. And so the sooner you can start interning, the better. And then you can obviously add it to your resume, but then it's also an excellent way to network. And wherever you intern, treat it as like a full-time job and put your best foot forward, because that's where you're going to develop those relationships and you can use those to network. So even if you don't want to work at that firm or they don't have an opening after you graduate, you can, reach out to those people and use them as a way to network. I think one of the key things to remember is everybody's been in the uncomfortable position of looking for a first-time job. No one loves it. I mean, maybe some people do. I did not. And so people are really happy to help because they reflect upon that experience and how awkward and uncomfortable it is. And so people are happy to be like, hey, yeah, call this person or that person. You just have to ask. I never asked and I truly regret it. I really do. So be brave and ask.
Speaking of regret really fast, so all the internships and the experiences I've had have been completely public sector. I haven't been private. So I wish now thinking and listening to Christina, I wish I had been done a private, like a private firm. She keeps using the word firm and I'm like, I can't relate because I've never done that. But I would like to see now how working for a consultant firm or a private entity, now I'm kind of stuck. Like if I jump ship and leave the public sector, I mean, I can go back to it, but I'm taking a risk that because I'm so familiar with public sector that I don't know how it is on the private sector side. So I might have to take that leap of faith eventually and we'll see what happens.
I would also say, so having all of those different experiences with internships is super helpful, but also still being involved in the community. If you are in the private side, you can get a lot of experience and understanding how the public side works too. If you are, say, on some of the different boards that your local government has. So like being on some of the advocacy boards or just being really involved in some of like the nonprofits and the agencies and showing up to the commissioner meetings, you can get a lot of connections in those type of ways. And again, it looks good and you understand a little bit more of that public side.
Thank you, Hannah. Okay, so someone asks that, what is a typical day like as a planner? What do you do?
Depends on the project or time of the year or who knows what. I mean, like yesterday, for instance, yesterday was bike to work day for me. So I was busy setting up our bike to work day energy station and doing all this and also working on we had our MPO project call. So I was also working in that middle of the day storing projects. So it really varies. Time of the year, what type of position you're in, what type of specialty you're in, how specialized your position is, what type of projects you have going on. Like some days I'm staffing our committee meetings and you're going to policy board meetings, you're going to city council meetings because related project is in your area. It really varies day by day. You're working with constituents or citizens, and it really varies day by day for me at least.
I also definitely think it depends on the size of the municipality, assuming you're working for a municipality or county or whatever that you're in. So for example, since I've worked in the city of Mount Airy and the town of Atlantic Beach, my roles were way different than when I was working for the city of Tucson, where I was much more kind of like pigeonholed or siloed. Granted, I enjoyed what I was doing, but working for a small community, I wear a bunch of different hats. And so I find myself kind of enjoying a smaller community because I'm in, it kind of switches up, whether it's not the most fun, but I have some instances of code enforcement or smaller plan development or navigating through the different regulations that I have to deal with. So I think geographic location as well as the size of the community that you're working for can dictate obviously your roles and what if you're being siloed or pigeonholed or whatever, or if you're wearing a bunch of different hats at the same time. I
completely agree with that. I have experience with the nonprofit side, with the state side, and the consulting side. And all of them have very different roles. The smaller you are, the more you're going to be doing and the more involved with all the projects. From the state side, you are kind of like in your box a bit, I guess you could say, and you work on one thing a bit more. And then you have a lot of coordination from a state level, the different districts and so forth. But then from the consulting side, that is very different as well, because you might have like 5 different projects that you're working on with the different contracts. And so it very much is different depending on the company you're working for and your specific role. So there's definitely no true answer that's the same for everyone.
Thank you, our panelists. And then, so our next question is, how is publishing or co-publishing viewed for planning job applications versus academia?
I can speak to this. I think I'm in a little bit of an unusual category where I've worked for the private sector and then also been involved in research in the private sector. Part of that is like I've sought out folks who are more inclined to ask like the big questions and look for how we can solve them. So for instance, while I was spending time at my former job at HDR, we actually partnered with FDOT, Florida Department of Transportation, and performed actually a very elaborate research analysis on accessibility nationwide. We ended up publishing that work and presenting it at the Transportation Research Board. So it was a big accomplishment. And it wasn't really directly related to like profit and loss. And that was more of an academic exercise. Here, my current job at Renaissance, I'm not directly involved, but we tend to do a lot of work with APA and also publishing work with advancing community engagement, particularly now that COVID-19 and the associated effects of the pandemic, how those have affected community engagement during the lockdown, and then how do we move forward. We've also published research on accessibility analyses, sensing a theme with accessibility. So it does seem to depend, however, where you're working for and for whom you're working. Some folks in the private sector and the public sector have little to no interest in doing anything researchy or academia-y. And that might be a really good interview question, or it could be something that you do on your own volition. I find it hard to imagine that anyone's boss is going to tell them to not write something up and publish it, because it's great publicity, if nothing else, for the department or the organization or the firm to really show off like all the great work that you're doing potentially.
Thank you, Cole.
Just to touch on that a bit, I would say from the consulting side, we don't really focus too much, my firm in particular, with research, unless that is a contract that we're doing research on. But since it is really good PR, and it just looks good for the company as a whole, if you do get published and you have, you're able to go to some of these conferences and stuff, like they will give you rewards for that. So they'll give you bonuses if you get published. But then again, that is on your own time. So it's kind of like they're paying, but you have to get published.
Thank you, Hannah.
Also, if you're, published, it does give a extra little level of like credibility. So it certainly couldn't hurt. Like people say, oh, well, they're, kind of look at it and you're like, oh, they're published. That's really great. They must be knowledgeable. So.
Thank you, Christina. Shall we move forward? Okay, so someone asks that someone right now currently has a part-time job as a GIS assistant at UCSD's campus planning department and will be a senior in the fall and will likely keep the job next year. Do you recommend trying to get an internship at a company outside of school or staying at this job for 1 year?
If it's something that you're truly passionate about, stay. It's not like a one size fits all. If it's something that you really enjoy doing and you want to stay there and you like it, and it's something you think you want to pursue, you like the avenue that you're on, great. But if it's something that you're not that excited about, that added internship will just give you more experience and exposure to different things. Certainly can never hurt.
I guess adding on.
I kind of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Julian. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. I kind of, I guess, spoke to this a little bit earlier. I mean, in school right now, school is the time that you can, jump and do this and do that and different internships and this and that. And that's an opportunity that you won't really completely have as much when you leave, or at least I try to have more lengthier time frames now that I'm out of school with positions. But being a student, you have the ability to go and try something and see if you do or you don't like it, rather than now, if I wanted to, jump ship again, I'd be taking a leap of faith. But that's just my personal opinion.
I think Julian and Christina definitely hit some great points there. Reasons to stay there or what reasons to get more experience, but especially if depending if you are interested in, taking a role out of, public or private entity, working for a government, working for a private firm or something. Yeah, like Julian said, it's a better time than there as a student to try to, try those experiences out. Or, if you want to broaden your tool set or your toolbox and do something else. But if you're passionate about GIS, do GIS. And there's plenty of GIS specific positions out there that you can go and do that. But if you're happy with that, go for it, keep on doing it. But if not, try something else if you want to too.
I wonder what the panel has to say about upward advancement in the near term after starting your first full-time entry-level position. So for instance, here at Renaissance, my job is just planner. We don't have planner 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't do all that. So I have my own internal way that I need to move up in the company. But I wonder if the panel could speak more generally to how they view advancement in the planning field within a shorter time frame.
I would say advancement happens once you get more certifications, at least from my experience. Once I am fully AICP, I'll be able to get a bonus. And then it's also how many years you've been in certain roles is when they consider you for the advancements. But also I've seen a lot of people who are higher up in their career, and the only way that they can truly get advancement is switching to a different company. And that's okay. Our generation now, no one really stays in a job for more than 10 years. That's a long time. So it's okay if you really don't like your position and you don't see yourself growing after a few years, take that jump, Julian, take that jump and really get your experience elsewhere, because you won't know. And sometimes you will get stuck. Some places just truly won't push you up, but other people will be like, wow, you're awesome. Let me hire you way higher. So don't feel like you need to stay somewhere.
Right. And even beyond that, for advancements, sometimes you might find yourself getting an advancement on accident. So for example, when I was talking about my friend earlier, and also another person I thought was my boss, she was hired as the secondary planner underneath the director, and then the director left a month later. So she by default had to assume that role rather abruptly. And the hiring process progressed. And so 3 months in, all of a sudden she went from being the planner with her first planning job to literally being the director. And she's been the director now for 5 years. So that just happened to happen, and things like that happen.
Especially in terms of advancement, I think I brought up good points. I guess similar to Cole's comments, working at RMPO, that's just, planner, we don't go planner 1, senior planner, stuff, different levels like that. We're planner, we have especially our salary, there's salary caps, there's, different ranges. So what do you consider advancement? So, of course, certificates, other, different, what are your accomplishments throughout the year, those metrics, get your salary increase every year. So is that you're good enough for advancement, or do you want to have a higher leadership role? Do you want to advance in your current organization? Do you want to stay in your particular field? For me, if I want to stay in particularly active transportation or bike pedestrian planning, Can I do that at the MPO? Probably not. Like if I want to move up, but I can have a larger, broader role. Maybe if I work for the city or something, we have more opportunities there in that particular field, or I could go work for a public transit agency or maybe a nonprofit. So it really varies. And I think with that too, talking about advancement and like possibly changing jobs, definitely like somebody, Christine, may be able to help with like talking about like, transferring your benefits, because that's a huge thing. Cause like when you're changing jobs, like I think Hannah mentioned, like a lot of people will change jobs, but may not stay there for like, maybe no more than 5 years. So like, what do you do in that case? Like I went from like a nonprofit to a state agency, now to a metropolitan planning organization who is fiscally managed by our local county government. So like all these different weird things that people don't talk about are benefits. How do you transfer those? So that always gets interesting too, if you do want to move around some.
Thank you, Joey.
With WGI, we really encourage advancement. We don't want people to feel like they're capped out, especially like a planner position. We don't have like level 1, level 2, level 3, but the way that we perceive it is through, extra certifications. We offer project management training, so you can take on like more of a managerial role and learn, how it is to be a project manager. So it depends how you perceive advancement. Do you see it as something that's financial, like you want monetary growth? Do you want greater income? Are you looking to gain more knowledge? Are you looking to be more of a project manager? So you kind of have to decide in your mind what that advancement is. And then from there, decide if it's something that you should ask for internally, perhaps, just ask for a little bit more money, or, get engaged in the manager training program. Or is it, I want advancement, I want something completely out of here, and I want to be in charge of a team, and I'm just not going to get that. So you kind of have to decide, I think, first in your mind, what that advancement is and what your idea of success is, and then kind of back your way into it from there.
Thank you, Christy.
And I know we're rapidly approaching like the stop time. So I think I'll cap off and ask everyone sort of a last question, which is what would be the one thing you would tell yourself, your younger self, starting in as with your full-time career job? What would be the one piece of advice you would give yourself?
I guess I'll go. I just thought something about talking about different roles, and a lot of people actually just kind of discourage me from applying for my current position. They're like, "Oh, you don't want to go into like public sector to do that," or my friends at the city working at city government jobs, and as planners are like, "Oh, don't go for the MPO. It's just like this like fluff job. You don't do anything. You don't build projects. You don't do this or that." And they're just like, it's like a dead end, just like fluff. But like it's different. You're working with people. Like it's every role has a different perspective. It asks people how they do that, what makes them happy there, because every role is truly different. It's what you make of it too. A lot of depending on your managers, you put your foot out there. You say, "Hey, I want to do this project, that project." Depending on your manager, they may say, "Yeah, take the reins, go initiate this project." And like my role, I do a lot of we don't build projects, we do a lot of programs, we do safety programs, we do obviously MPO, we administer federal funds for projects, and you never know what you're going to get into. And especially as a planner, especially if you work in public roles or even as a private firm, definitely know how to interpret things, because in planning world, we have a lot of technical language, and our citizens, like we were talking acronyms and whatnot, like citizens don't comprehend that. Even active transportation, people don't know what active transportation is. So just those little things, and your relations with the public, relations with, like working with your networking, your own people in your organization, just put your best foot out there, be the best person you can be, and have fun with it too.
That might be 3 pieces of advice, but I'll take it.
Oh, shit. Sorry. I get going with this. Sorry.
All right, Hannah.
So that was really good advice. I would say probably being a female and not your typical looking female. I would say don't be afraid. Don't be silenced. Sit at the table. And even though you're looked at as potentially lower in ranks, your voice still counts. Do not let people say, "Oh, you're not qualified, like you can't do that." Be persistent, be patient when they say like, oh, it will take a little bit of this, but definitely make sure people know that you do have a lot to bring, and don't be silenced.
That's a wonderful advice. Julian?
Yeah. What would I tell my younger self? Quite a few things. But in this case, I touched on that earlier. Is that I wish I had kind of explored a little. Granted, I explored a good amount of the planning sector, but specifically public. And so I kind of wish I would have tried and got my feet wet in other portions, specifically private sector. That's kind of the main thing that I can think about right now.
Good to know. And Christina, I know you're not a practicing like planner like us over here, but I wonder if you have any closing thoughts or advice.
I would say just, don't be afraid to ask questions and to network. Like people are certainly way more, I was definitely, when I graduated, afraid to network, afraid to ask questions in terms of, I thought people would feel just like, oh, I don't want to deal with you, and that's not the case. People are so willing to help. You just have to network and use any avenue that you can, friends, family friends, people that you interned with. LinkedIn is an awesome resource. So, connect with people on LinkedIn if there's a firm that you're interested in, or, an agency or whatever. Connect with them, send them a message directly when you press connect. Send them a message. Tell them, hey, I'm a junior. I'm looking for a summer internship. Do you know if you're hiring? They will happily. I receive so many of those a day from my colleagues that are that work within WGI. And like, hey, will you look into this person? They just sent me a message on LinkedIn. They might be good for this position. So don't be afraid to do that. It's such a great tool. We are like constantly looking. I spend most of my day on LinkedIn looking at resumes and stuff like that. So use it and network, and be confident in your abilities.
One last thing that I would like to tell emerging planners is make sure you negotiate your salary. A lot of times people do not do that. I personally did, but many of my classmates, they didn't. They thought, oh, that's a great salary. But really how much you start at does start your career. And so if you start really, really low, it is a little more difficult to negotiate up higher because you don't have that leverage to say, no, I will not take less than this amount. So yeah, definitely know your worth and make sure you're willing to walk if they're lowballing you, because then that also means they don't truly value you, especially if it's a larger company.
Awesome advice from everybody, and thank you so much to this wonderful panel. Thank you, Nan, for facilitating the questions. If you might have asked a question that we maybe didn't get to, Zoom keeps a transcript, and we will write those down and ask our panel and make sure that in our communications following that question gets answered over email or in text. As I mentioned before, this presentation and the associated slideshow materials will be posted on the planning.org website. Thank you for paying attention and coming out. There will be a brief survey that we'll email out probably in the next coming week that just asks a few questions, primarily, what types of programming should we do in the future? And did you like this event? And then critically, are you interested in joining APA's leadership in the future? There's a bunch of great leadership opportunities, both elected and appointed, that APA is always looking to fill with new folks, new planners, people who are just starting out, as opposed to people who have been around for 30 years, who've been in these positions forever. It's time to get new blood in, and we're looking to recruit. So look for that survey in your inbox and look for all of these materials. So thank you. The SRC is dedicated to making good content for students and improving opportunities for them nationwide. So thanks so much. Thanks again. Thanks for joining me.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all and good luck.
Yes, good luck.